welcome back to the Daily Report. This is The Marketplace, and on The Marketplace tonight, we were talking about businesses. We have, of course, the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry. And as, you know, the title suggests, we're going to be talking about investment, trade, and even industry. Now, Honorable Salim, maybe if you could just tell us, we watched a clip before we went on, you know, the short break. We do know that there's going to be an amendment bill that's going to come for the business environment. And one of the problems or one of the issues that businesses raised was public participation. How exactly, you know, how thorough was the public participation for this particular amendment bill?
Thank you very much. The business laws amendment bill, you know, which is now a draft in Parliament. We started the public participation in September, late September. We announced, we gave a notice to the public and also to the key stakeholders to come up with key proposals that will enable the business environment. Proposals that will also focus on consumer protection and proposals that will inspire manufacturing. So then we came up with a very big report, which then we narrowed down into key issues. Right. We were able to divide the issues into 3 key categories. Issues that will require legislative reforms, issues that will require policy reforms, and issues that will require maybe administrative action. The issues that required legal reforms, then we collapsed them into an omnibus bill, right, which is amending 18 acts of parliament, and it is also creating 57 sections of the law. Right. That was the first instant of public participation, and the last 2 weeks, we have been out there again engaging the public, especially the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, right, and key stakeholders. And now we have a fair draft, which will essentially also go back to the public before Parliament is able to enact this, right, to be the law. Right.
Bwana CS, when you came into this particular ministry, when you were taking over from, you know, Rebecca Miano, you did become the digital trade champion for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and right away you started, you know, getting public participation. Maybe what are some of the things that triggered these changes? Because policy shifts being one of your first, you know, undertakings as the Cabinet Secretary raises a lot of questions. What exactly did you see that maybe was wrong that you wanted to rectify?
It is not me who was seeing anything wrong, but I think it is the business stakeholding. In right, fact, the EU and the ambassadors here, right, they have 10 issues. Right. They have 10 issues that they raised with me in the first Qatar's call. And then when I did meetings also with other key stakeholders, they raised the same issues. The manufacturers have been raising issues. Right. More critical issues have been raised on our tax framework, the cost of energy, and many other issues that people have raised. So it is not about me, it is right, about what can we do in right, the environment that will inspire investments, trade and industrialization. And as a result of that, therefore, then these are initiatives that we will be driving through. Right. And you mentioned the business amendment laws. It's not the only one. We actually have 5 others, you know, which are also ready for public participation. Trade description bill. We have, you know, geographical texting. There are 5 more which we have just processed. Right. And they all geared towards ensuring that we have an environment that can address most of the issues. You know, like one of the comments from the media small enterprises is the issue of financing. Right. And what we are also looking at is to see how we can augment the bigger manufacturers and also the medium enterprises to work together. Right now, there's no mechanism. Right. So we'll need to go back and look at our trade development bill and have a process where the manufacturers, much bigger, can coexist with medium enterprises. That has to be done within the framework of the law.
Right. Bwana CS, tax reforms is one of the major problems that some of the MSMEs have raised, and a lot of, other stakeholders, including even the EU itself. Maybe if you could just tell us, the tax law amendment bill is also coming in, and it is targeting largely, the digital space, agriculture, and even, the eco space as well. If you could just tell us, these are changes that are going to be affected. These are tax reforms that are going to come in. You have promised businesses that, you're going to make it a bit more stable for them. What are some of the things that businesses should be looking forward to?
One of the areas that I need to talk about in terms of the current suggested taxation measures, these measures are not being introduced to increase taxes. In fact, if you look at most of the proposals, is basically to provide relief, to many Kenyans in the business sector. And more importantly for us in the investment, we are looking at a predictable framework. For example, in the special economic zones, where we have been giving tax rebates, we want to see, like now, about 10 years of tax predictability, so that somebody can make a calculation of their capital and see how they can provide investment in an environment that is much more predictable. It is much more, you can predict with accuracy your profits and your expenditures. So it is those kind of issues that we are now pushing, so that we can ease the challenges that happen in the business space.
All right. Ambassador, maybe if you could just chime in. Of course, taxation reforms are always an issue in every single country. When it comes to investment promotion coming into the country, considering that we have to grow, our foreign direct investments, how exactly does this usually impact potential investors?
Yeah. So the conversation we had with the minister and the business sectors here is that in order to attract investment, first you have to treat those who are here well. So the investors who are already in the country need to make business and good business in order to attract further investment. And for attracting investment, you need to have a stable policy framework, and most importantly, a stable tax regime. Because any investor will make a calculation. In 5 years, in 10 years, I can make that much profit. Is it good that I go to Kenya? Should I go to Tanzania or to Singapore or wherever? So for that to make, they need to know what are the parameters. And if the parameters are changing all the time, every investor will say, oh, let's wait and see, let's let the dust settle and then we'll see. So that's what, from our point of view as EU, we said, the first thing we need is predictability. So you decide on your frame, and hopefully it's better than the neighboring countries, because otherwise you will lose out.
Right.
So you have to be more attractive than the competitors. And then whatever you decide, you stick to it for some time.
Right. Duration is also very important. The ambassador has said, they want to wait until the dust settles. So, Bwana CS, you're the best person to answer this. When will the dust settle?
The dust is settling. Right now, I think you mentioned earlier that the economy is doing well. So I think those are good signs of the dust settling. But more importantly, now we are in that process of making laws that address some of the issues that Ambassador has raised. In fact, there was a debate today in Parliament on this bill. So we expect in the next few months we will have it. We have most of those bills passed, and therefore that then will be a good beginning, to the reform process that we are actualizing.
Right,
Can I
Ambassador,
say
you can
so?
help us, rally up some of those investors because the dust is settling.
Yeah. So for us, I think it's very important to see that the government is responding to the needs of the private sector. And speaking from my experience, I haven't seen a successful country, economically speaking, where there's not an intense dialogue between the private sector and the public sector. So government needs to engage, see what is the enabling environment that is most fitting for the needs of its
People.
business environment. So, and not only the large, not only the small, but it has to fit all of them. And if you only benefit one, then the whole economy is growing in an unequilibrated way. So in Europe, for example, you have the big companies and the small companies cluster around the big ones, and they deliver the smaller pieces that are needed for the bigger companies to assemble, let's say in a manufacturing plant.
Yeah.
And that's the survival strategy for the small ones. And the small ones in Europe have become so powerful that they themselves become global exporters, even in a very small niche market with maybe only one or two products.
Right.
So it is possible.
Yeah.
Right, Ambassador, let's talk about access to finance for a minute before I give it over to the CS. When it comes to marginalized groups and even micro and small and medium enterprises in the informal sector, it's a bit hard for them to access information. What are some of the ways that you would suggest for the Kenyan context, to amp this up?
Yeah. So one of the maybe the strongest bottlenecks for SMEs is financing. So we have signed agreements with several local banks whereby European Union money is channeled through local banks to open windows for small and medium-sized enterprises. Some have a specific window for young people, for women. So that space, that money is protected for them. And the idea is also that you use alternative banking, including the Hustler Fund and others, which can bridge the gap and make the very small upcoming companies bankable until they reach, let's say, the lower threshold. And I heard already some of the local banks say that the alternative banking models are already reaching the lower part of their portfolio. So there seems to be something moving in the right direction, but it's not only financing, it's capacity building. So we are also financing enterprise breeders next to universities.
Right.
So the students can experiment and get started whilst they still study, and then get support in business management, in bookkeeping, accounting, technical skills, and access to finance. So they're in a protected, in a greenhouse, let's say.
Right.
So they stay in the greenhouse until they're ready to go out. That is a very successful model that you have in Europe.
Right.
And it seems to be working here as well.
Right. Buona CS, you had a rebuttal for the ambassador?
Yes, I wanted just to add, and if you looked at the clip that you played, one of the issues raised by the medium enterprises and small businesses is the issue of financing, which is very, very critical. They need capital, and they need that kind of support.
Right.
So in addition to what we are doing with the EU, through our ministry and through Kenya Development Corporation, we also have 5 billion shillings to support the small, medium enterprises and this is money which is loaned at a single digit. And I'm happy that also the partnership with the EU recently through KCB, 32 billion is available, for youth and women micro enterprises, which is also given at single digit. And part of what we jointly need to do now is to ensure that now this information moves out there so that the businesses that are targeted can have the right information on how to access these funds. But already this is what we are doing, and we are also aware that the Hustler Fund has been very impactful also on individuals and group businesses. So all these efforts joined together provide some capital, to financing of small and medium enterprises.
Right. Bwana CS, let me just take you back to the policy side. We're talking about the Business Laws Amendment Bill. One of the things, or one of the bodies that is concentrated on the most is the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Policy is important, and even quality upholding is very important. You said something interesting. You said that you wouldn't be opposed to the private sector also coming in with laboratories and giving services wherever KEBS cannot. How exactly is this going to pan out, considering that involvement of the private sector could bring in some loopholes that would make it harder to establish good quality products?
Thank you very much. In fact, yesterday we had a very good event. We were awarding, businesses that have demonstrated quality products. And I was happy to find that the small and medium enterprises had a good space also to participate in that event. And the reason I'm talking about seeing how we can bring in the private sector on matters of standardization and quality is because KEBS may not have everything. They may not have all the expertise, and part of this then can be accredited to other institutions to work together with KEBS.
Right.
And this is not a new thing. Already KEBS is in partnership with different organizations on matters standards.
Right.
And so it is just an expansion of service delivery. So that where we don't have the right technology, the right expertise, and there is an investor or a private sector that has that capacity, then they can see how to work together in that respect.
Right. Bwana CS, say a loophole emerges and the private sector takes advantage of it, and we have a situation like the sugar scandal where there is substandard sugar on our shelves. How exactly will the government regulate some of these newcomers?
If that happens, there will be a framework. In fact, that is a good example. But I can also give you another example.
Right.
You see, like today I was at one of the companies who do Mabati, and we are discussing the issues of quality and how other products of low quality also find their space in the market. You see now, if we give an opportunity to the same company that is doing the same product to look at quality of its products and other products, there will be conflict of interest.
Right.
So even as we are discussing, we are very cognizant of those issues. And at the right time, when that decision has been made, we will look at all those loopholes and see how that can be bridged. But as I said earlier, there are already a lot of arrangements where KEBS is working with private sector on a number of issues on standards.
All right.
Yeah.
And maybe, Ambassador, if you could just tell us, of course, phytosanitary standards are very important as well. And these are the things that, products should be looked into before they make their way into the international markets. How exactly is the EU looking into Kenya, considering our quality? How do we match up to other countries? How are we doing?
The phytosanitary standards are very important in Europe to protect our consumers. So this is taken very seriously, and that's why in the past there have been issues around products from outside. So what we're trying to do is the standards are there, and there are minimum thresholds, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're trying to do is work with partner countries where a problem has been identified to ensure that they could be overcome, because in the end, it's also in the interest of the partner country and the consumers in the partner country to get a minimum standard. We are not talking here about luxury standard. We're talking about damage. Right. Damage to the health or the environment. So we have to make sure that this is not happening, especially with food. So in the case of flowers, for example, we had some pests, and there the key issue is that they are not infecting other things. But the idea of the EU is to give technical assistance to the countries to enable them to have products that pass the phytosanitary standards. And we also have a dialogue, so it's not just a blind application. So when there's a problem, we're talking also to the producers' associations, to the government, to try to find solutions.
Right, and labeling is so important, knowing what exactly is in different products or even produce. Wanna see us quite recently, the court upheld, the throwing away of the ban on genetically modified, organisms or even products. Knowing that this could come in, the National Biosafety Authority did suggest that maybe the solution would be labeling anything that has GMO on the shelves so that people can make an informed decision. Do you believe that this could be, a framework that could be working? Is this something that could be taken up by the government?
Yeah, I think it is something that has been suggested, and just like any other suggestion, it will have to go through discussion and participation of the key people so that we can look at all sides of that suggestion. So it is something that it requires a very a keen discussion to see how it's going to be implemented. Even when we are discussing with our partnership with the EU, there are also matters that have been taken up in the agreement on how we make the production of our products more sustainable. And therefore, I believe when we also label our products to the EU, we'll have to say something about compliance, whether we have complied to. So the issue of labeling and branding is not just for GMO related products, but this will go along in branding the Kenya products, in relation to the market that we are sending them. All right. And I'm sure it is an issue that it is part of our engagement with the EU to see that there's compliance of issues of quality, but also looking at matters on sustainable production.
All right, of course. Now, when we come back from this very short break, we're going to be looking at the Buy Kenya, Build Kenya agenda. How exactly has it been faring on, and what exactly do other countries think about it? We will be right back. Don't go too far.